Snip, tuck, tuck, fold. Crease, tuck, tape.
It's not that complicated, Dad.
Wrap, crease, tape, twist, tape.
Ohio Lottery scratch offs make great holiday gifts. And play Holiday Bonus Millions with a 200 times multiplier and a $2 million top prize.
Fold, crinkle, crinkle, roll.
Plus, you can enter non-winning tickets in My Lotto Rewards for a second chance to win up to 1,000 times the price of your ticket.
Please crinkle, gate, fold, ring, curl, scrunch.
The best part, Dad? No wrapping required.
No tuck, tuck, fold?
No tuck, tuck, fold.
Give the gift of fun. Lottery players are subject to Ohio laws and commission regulations. Play responsibly.
Welcome to Mind Love, episode 248. Today's episode is all about how chronic indecision is linked to anticipatory anxiety.
You basically cannot solve the problem of too much thinking with more thinking. And most of that is because of where you're located in time. Most of your thinking is in the future, in your imagination, what could happen, what might happen, what I could do, what I should do. Whereas if you shift out of thinking into a sensory experience, what is happening right now? What can I smell? What can I hear? Where am I? What's going on right in this very moment? That's sensory input. That's the present moment. And there's no emergency going on then. And you shift away from what if, to what is.
Turn up your frequency with Mind Love. Bite-sized brain hacks for seekers, dreamers, and doers. It's time to give your mind a little love with your host, Melissa Monti.
If this is your first time giving your mind a little love, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Mind love is a habit, and the more you give your mind that love and intention, the better you'll feel about yourself and your life. Plus, it's really a win-win because more subscribers means Mind Love attracts even more amazing guests to bring you their wisdom. So don't forget to subscribe. I also want to let you know about a couple changes coming up. On Tuesdays, I've been posting main episodes from episode 248, 249, you get the picture. And on Fridays, I've been posting exclusive episodes where they're public for a little bit and then they go gated. Starting this week, I'm just counting up from 248. So Friday will be 249, then 250. You get the idea. Right now, there's over 50 episodes that are just for premium members. Soon, there's going to be 100 episodes just for premium members. So if you're not a premium member, go binge some of those exclusive episodes that are only going to be public for a little while. Otherwise, you can join premium at mindlove.com/premium and get access to all of it. mindlove.com/premium. Do you have a hard time making up your mind? Do you ever wonder why some people just choose and you can't? Maybe your indecision pops up when ordering at restaurants or deciding your next action, which might actually lead to doing nothing at all. Maybe you couldn't decide what you wanted to be, so you ended up in whatever career you landed in. Maybe you get stuck on Amazon for hours just deciding between 1,000 versions of the same product. Maybe you get so caught up in how you're going to do something that you never end up doing it. So you distract yourself by ordering food from Uber Eats, but can't decide what to get. I used to be really indecisive, and I still can be, but I've definitely made major improvements. The weird thing is I used to wear it kind of like a badge of honor, which is actually really common and strange if you think about it. I feel like I hear someone proclaim this almost every time I'm in a coffee shop. Usually with women, unfortunately, saying, "Sorry, I'm just so indecisive." I used to wonder why some people just choose, and I couldn't. We all do it sometimes. Avoiding decisions is a very common thing if you haven't noticed. But most people tend to get on with their lives, while others let it stop them from living, or at least living well. If you look up why people are indecisive, you'll get a number of answers like people-pleasing or perfectionism or fear of taking responsibility. But all of these things come back to one thing: anticipatory anxiety, which is basically getting anxious about the possibility of being anxious. And we'll get much deeper into this in the episode, but what you need to know now is that it's a form of anxiety. And it's basically when you get hijacked by your own imagination. And I think that some people underestimate the negative effects that this can really have on their lives. It's a whole spectrum that can range from just getting in your own way or never following your dreams to never leaving your house or never dating again because the last time something unexpected happened that freaked you out and you just can't risk it again. And because of the processes happening inside your brain, willpower not only doesn't work, it actually makes it worse. So it's nearly impossible to tell yourself, I just won't get anxious this time. But the thing is, indecision is not a personality trait. It's a behavioral problem. And yeah, I know that makes your coffee shop order a little less cute. I will disclose that no one around you thinks it's cute anyways, so I don't know where that came from. But the good news is, that means it can be changed. But in order to change it, it's helpful to, or maybe even necessary, to understand a few things, like our personal areas of sensitivity, like when indecision comes up, the patterns that we create when we avoid decisions, and the underlying issues that can cause it. So that's what we're talking about today. And our guest is Dr. Sally Winston. She's a clinical psychologist, a master clinician in anxiety disorders and OCD, and co-author of 4 books with Dr. Martin Seif. She's also the founder and executive director of the Anxiety and Stress Disorders Institute. So 3 key things we will learn are why trying harder to face your fears and using willpower to force decisions simply does not work, why avoidance reinforces anticipatory anxiety and chronic indecisiveness, and the 5 steps of surrender to overcome it. Before we go deep today, I want to give you a little gift, and I want to give it to you every single day. It's called the Morning Mind Love. I know how life can be. You're all fired up after an inspiring episode, and then a new day or a new challenge comes at you, and it's just hard to keep up that energy. Well, the Morning Mind Love is kind of like an oracle from your higher self to help you start each day with a positive focus. Plus, when you sign up, you get 2 free gifts, a 30-minute binaural meditation and 30 days of journaling prompts to help you remember who you truly are. And it's all completely free. So join over 9,000 people and go to mindlove.com to sign up or text the word morning to 33777. And now let's welcome Sally Winston to the show.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
So what intrigued you to focus your latest work on anticipatory anxiety specifically?
Well, Dr. Seif and I wrote 2 earlier books, one on intrusive thoughts, which is basically obsession, and one on reassurance seeking and checking, which is basically compulsion. And then what we realized that there's actually a third component to a lot of anxiety. There's the what if part, and there's the attempt to make yourself feel better part. But there's also this other phenomenon that happens in all kinds of anxiety that comes in OCD and phobia and depression and all kinds of situations, which is the anxiety that comes when you're anticipating or expecting or waiting for something that you expect you're going to have trouble with, or is going to make you anxious, you might not be able to handle, you don't know how it's going to turn out. And it's in anticipation of that, the worry about something that's coming up in the future, or that you even just imagine might be coming up in the future. And so there hasn't been a lot of work written about anticipatory anxiety, but it's actually what we call a transdiagnostic phenomenon. It happens in all different kinds of situations and different kinds of anxiety. So we thought we'd write a book about that.
So anticipatory anxiety is almost being afraid of your anxiety or being anxious that you might have anxiety coming up. Is that what I'm hearing?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, we talk about it as being actually the 3rd level of fear, because there's fear, and then there's fear of the fear, and then there's fear of the fear of the fear. And that's anticipatory anxiety. It sounds weird, but let me give you an example and it'll make sense. So let's say I'm scared of a bee. I'm afraid of a bee. But then what if I'm afraid that if I might see a bee, I would have a panic attack and it would stress out my heart so much that I would have a heart attack and die? So that's called fear of fear, and that's panic disorder. But there's another level to this, which is what we call the avoidance layer, the fear of fear of fear, which is I'm thinking of maybe signing up for a camping trip, but what if I see a bee and I have a panic attack? I'm going to worry about that for the next 3 months, I think maybe I won't sign up for the camping trip. So it's the level of avoidance when you anticipate or you think about or you imagine that you're going to have an outcome that you don't want, or that there'll be something you can't handle. And there comes with it this very strong urge to do anything to not get into that circumstance. And so it provokes a great deal of avoidance.
It almost sounds like this level of fear can be the most debilitating, because you're not even waiting for an opportunity for the fear to come. You're assuming that it's probably going to come in more instances than maybe it would. And so then you're just sort of shutting off parts of your life.
You're absolutely right. It is in many ways the most debilitating because it provokes such a huge amount of avoidance behavior, and people don't do things that they would otherwise get to do. And so it can really interfere with your life. And what happens is that so much happens in your imagination, and it's so vivid, and you're so hijacked by it that you really think that you don't have a choice except to avoid it in some way. And that gets to be a tremendous intrusion in your life. And most phobias have a huge amount of anticipatory anxiety. One of the things that we discovered a long time ago about panic disorder, people have panic attacks, is that many times if you ask them, when was your last panic attack? And they're housebound and they can't go anywhere, and they have very severe agoraphobia secondary to panic, is they'll say, well, it was 11 years ago. And they'll say, well, what's going on? And it's anticipatory anxiety that's keeping them in the house, because they're afraid that if they go out and they get anxious that they'll have a panic attack, they won't be able to stand it, so they have to stay home. That's where the debilitating effect comes from. And it's very demoralizing. And the thing that's so interesting about this is that anticipatory anxiety is pretty much a liar. It seems to be telling you or predicting or warning, or it seems like a red flag. If I have this much anxiety now, I'll never be able to handle it next week, right? So it seems like it's warning you. And in fact, it has absolutely no predictive capacity whatsoever. It doesn't tell you if it's going to go well, if it doesn't tell you if it's going to go badly. It does a lot of lying. And very, very often, if you push through the anticipatory anxiety, you actually do the thing, it's like, well, that wasn't so bad. And then you're mad at yourself for all the bleeding that you did before you ever got caught. And then you never did get caught. If you think about kids who are like screaming, they don't want to get an injection, and it goes for hours and hours of screaming and tantrums and misery. And, they don't want the needle. I hate needles. I'm scared of needles. And then you finally give it to them and it's like, well, that's it, But the thing is that you think, well, they finally learned that injections aren't so terrible. But what they remember is the anticipatory anxiety. They don't remember that it actually went fine. They remember that it's a horrible experience because they clump it all together.
It reminds me of people who stop trying to find relationships because their relationships have gone bad, where then all of a sudden they're like, no, I'm swearing off men or women or whatever it is, and I'm never dating again. And they don't really remember all of the positive times in a relationship because maybe it went south, or maybe they did end up with a sociopath or something like that. But doesn't mean that love itself is going to be the danger. It was just that one experience that's now bleeding through in all of your others.
Yeah, and that's the slipperiness of anxiety, is that it can move from one thing to another and get stuck at things. And then we call it being hijacked by your imagination. That you can have a very, very vivid experience, either something that really did happen and it's a memory, or a vivid experience of something you've imagined could happen. And it's so vivid that you become hijacked by it, and you think it's factual. You think that this is what's really going to happen. And then, of course, it makes perfect sense to not reach out, not to stretch yourself, because it feels as if you're taking a massive risk.
So what's actually happening in your brain when anticipatory anxiety is created? You know what's interesting about mindfulness? It's not just about being present in the moment. It's about being thoughtful about the future. We meditate, we exercise, we work on ourselves, all to create a better tomorrow, right? But there's one piece of the future planning puzzle that nobody likes to talk about. I get it. Life insurance feels heavy. But here's the thing. Just like meditation is an act of self-care, getting life insurance is an act of family care. It's about making sure your love continues to support your family, even when you're not there to do it yourself. That's why I want to tell you about SelectQuote. They're one of America's leading insurance brokers with nearly 40 years of experience helping over 2 million customers. Their licensed insurance agents work for you to tailor a life insurance policy for your individual needs in as little as 15 minutes. And here's what's cool. They actually reward you for taking care of yourself. If you're in good health, they work with carriers that could get you same-day coverage for up to $5 million. No medical exam required. And it's way more affordable than you might think. You could even get coverage for up to $1 million for as little as $20 per month. We just did this all recently after putting it off for years, and I can't tell you the peace of mind just from getting it done. So get the right life insurance for you for less at selectquote.com/mindlove. Go to selectquote.com/mindlove today to get started. That's selectquote.com/mindlove.
This episode is brought to you by Etsy.
Oh.
Hear that?
Okay. Thank you.
Etsy knows these aren't the sounds of holiday gifting. Well, not the ones you're hoping for. You want squeals of delight. Happy tears.
How did you?
And spontaneously written songs of joy.
I am so happy. Oh, yeah, oh, yeah, oh, yeah.
Okay, the song needs a bit of work, but anyway, to get those reactions, make sure everyone on your list feels heard with handmade, handpicked, and designed gifts from small shops on Etsy. Gifts like personalized jewelry, custom artwork, cozy style items, vintage pieces, and home decor to celebrate all of your favorite people and their specific kind of special. For original gifts that say, I get you, Etsy has it.
So what's actually happening in your brain when anticipatory anxiety is created?
Oh, that's a great question. It's a little bit complicated because fear circuitry in the brain is pretty complicated. When we see something that's a trigger of some kind, either it can be internal or external, like you see something that scares you, your brain takes in that trigger, and it has an immediate path straight to the limbic system. And the central part of the limbic system is called the amygdala. And you have all heard of the fight and flight and freeze response. You get a huge thing, which we call a whoosh, which gives you the experience of rapid onset of anxiety. And that is what happens when you see something scary. But there's an interesting phenomenon in the brain in that there's actually a way station in the brain called the thalamus. And the thalamus is where you process the information that comes in through your senses about what's going on in the world. And then the thalamus is the thing that sends the signal to your amygdala. But it also has another pathway where it sends a signal, and that's sends a signal at the same time to the cortex, which is where we do our thinking and analyzing and judging. The amygdala is stupid. It just is on or off. It's like either you turn the alarm on or you don't. The interesting thing is that the amygdala path is very, very fast. And the cortical or thinking path is just a little bit slower. So you actually feel the fear, the big whoosh, before you get a chance to think about it, right? So if the typical example we give is you're walking along a path in the forest and you see something that's long and thin across the pathway and you jump backwards and you get a huge jolt and then you go, oh, it's not a snake, it's a stick. But you get your whoosh first, right? And then you get your analysis of what's actually there. But what happens with anticipatory anxiety is you get your whoosh, and then you get the secondary part that comes in the thinking, which is, okay, so maybe I jumped back because a car was coming at me and it didn't hit me. But then a thought comes up, well, what if I hadn't jumped back fast enough? Or what if there's another car coming? Or what if I wasn't paying attention and I'm a really bad person to be walking around by myself? I should have someone with me. Or what if, and they start a whole cascade of what ifs and worries about something that didn't actually happen. It just could have happened. And you're busy building basically a bunch of movies, very dramatic movies in your head, all based on this signal that came from your thalamus through to your cortex, but it's doing a what if. Then what happens is eventually your brain is able to go straight from a what if to the amygdala with passing immediately. So there's not even any outside thing. You might be just thinking, gee, I'd like to go for a walk. Whoosh! Because what's happened is your what ifs have just jumped in the middle when there's actually nothing going on. It's just your imagination. Does that make sense, what I just said?
It does. And so what differentiates anxiety from just fear?
Well, that's a question that everybody answers differently. Some people say that fear is rational, so that, if you have a saber-toothed tiger running after you, you have reason to be afraid. And then they say that anxiety is a response to your own thinking. I don't think there's that much of a clear distinction between the two. So I think most people feel like anxiety is something that they create and that stays with them and that doesn't go away with reassurance. Whereas fear is something where if you're uncertain about something and you get a fact, and the fact will quell the fear and then it's over. Whereas with anxiety, if you've got an imagination and you're having obsessional doubts about something, there's no facts that can settle it because it's in your imagination. It's not something that came from the outside.
So what role does indecision play in this whole idea of anticipatory anxiety?
That's an interesting question. The thing that works the fastest to make anticipatory anxiety go away is the decision to avoid it, right? It works faster than Xanax. Xanax takes a few minutes. It works faster than someone reassuring you that everything is going to be okay, what we call empty reassurance. But if you decide you're not going, whoa, you just feel better instantly. So the decision to avoid works great. But the decision to commit to something also helps reduce anticipatory anxiety. Because if you don't commit to doing something, then you get in this state, which is maybe I'll go, maybe I won't go. What will people think of me if I do go? I have to go, but maybe I can get out of it, but maybe I can delay it, but I don't know. But you go through this rumination and worry process that goes around and round and round, and you keep changing your mind. Well, I'll return it. I'm not going to keep it. Maybe I will keep it. And that whole process of back and forth, worrying and then trying to tell yourself it's okay, that all is what fuels anticipatory anxiety. That keeps it going. But if you decide, I'm doing it, no matter what, even if I feel lousy, I'm willing to feel lousy. I'm just going to do it. I'm committing to it. You eliminate all that back and forth oscillation. And it doesn't make the anxiety completely go away, but it does reduce it. So decision to avoid makes it go away. Decision to commit reduces it. And indecision is the thing that keeps it going.
What I find so fascinating about this topic is if I wasn't so self-aware, I wouldn't realize that a lot of this is even happening in my mind. Like if you would have told me this 10 years ago, like, do you get anticipatory anxiety? I'd be like, no, that sounds crazy. Like that's a whole lot of internal talking. But now sometimes I'll kind of snap out of my mind where I'm like becoming the observer of my own thoughts. And I'm like, oh my God, didn't even realize that you guys in there, my brain voices are weighing the pros and cons of things, or like, I'll kind of touch on like, oh, maybe I'll go, nah, I don't know. And like, I'll just be doing something else, or I'll just think about something else to distract myself. And because I start doing something else, I don't realize that's the whole process of the indecision, because I'm avoiding thinking about it because it's creating a little bit of stress or a little bit of anxiety. So I do something else, and then maybe I'll think about it later, and maybe it was a goal. And then all of a sudden I'm beating myself up because I keep ignoring that goal. And I'm like, maybe I'll do this. And then I think about doing it, and then I think about failure, and then I do something else instead. And it's this whole cycle that really does, I think, take a level of self-awareness to realize that it's happening, especially because for me, I don't have like a debilitating phobia that keeps me inside. It's hitting me in all these more subtle ways. And I think sometimes the subtle ways are a little bit harder to spot, but they're a lot more common.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. And that is why we did the books with what we call our 3 voices of the mind, because I think everybody has those voices, just the ones you were describing. And the 3 characters talk to each other inside your head. And 2 of the characters keep anxiety going by their own interaction. There's worried mind, which is the what if, imagination. Worried mind confuses possibility for probability. They think that if something is possible, it's likely. And that's the what if, worrier, imagination, suppose, future-oriented, worrying part of the mind. And then we all naturally have an instinct to try to calm worried voice down, but we do it in a way that actually isn't helpful. And that's the voice we call false comfort, which is, oh, everything's going to be okay, or you really don't have to go, or, you can just, if you distract yourself, maybe you won't think about it, or don't think something so negative, just think positive. All those kinds of ways people try to respond to their worries that actually don't work at all. What people sometimes call their coping mechanisms, which are usually ways of avoiding in some way. And so they offer something like that to themselves, to their what if part, and that just stimulates more what ifing. It doesn't actually make the anxiety go away. And so you have this back and forth between your worried voice and your false comfort, and they go round and round and round, they escalate. But we also have another part of us, which we call wise mind, that actually knows that those guys aren't helping, and that really knows an awful lot more than you acknowledge, which is that you can handle things, that these are worries, they're in your imagination, they're not happening, and has a very, what's called a metacognitive, or ability to look at what's going on. The wise mind that we all have, we can contact, and we can ask our own wise mind, what's really likely here, not what could possibly happen, but what's actually really likely, and can encourage us to do things that are important to us if we're willing to just be uncomfortable, usually either beforehand or at the beginning, and get through. So those 3 voices are talking to each other all the time internally. And when you read the books, you start to be able to do what you said, step back and observe not so much the content, but the process that's going on. And when you notice the process, you're able to say, wait a minute, I'm in absurd land here. And I think I choose not to be there.
One of the things that I learned in my 20s that is something that I still is just one of the biggest learnings of my life, is that I usually cannot think my way out of problems. And it's the way I tried to do it forever before that, where it's like, well, if I just sit here and think about it enough, or I'll walk myself through it or whatever. And yes, there's a time and a place for thinking about things, but I've found that when I'm actually feeling an emotion about it, the only way to move through it is through taking action. Like, I have to show myself that the outcome can be different. I can't really talk myself into it, because I can say all the things that you're saying that second voice says, but like you said, it doesn't actually help.
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite phrases is is for this kind of process, which is what you're calling thinking, trying to think your way out of something, which is the analyzing compulsion or ruminating. And you basically cannot solve the problem of too much thinking with more thinking. And most of that is because of where you're located in time. Most of your thinking is in the future, in your imagination, what could happen, what might happen, what I could do, what I should do, all of this stuff. Whereas if you shift out of thinking into a sensory experience, what is happening right now? What can I smell? What can I hear? Where am I? What's going on right in this very moment? That's sensory input. That's the present moment. And there's no emergency going on then. And you shift away from what if to what is by shifting out of cognition into your senses. That's one way of dealing with anticipatory anxiety, when you notice that you're doing it and then you step back and you say, well, I think I'll just stay right here. And that's not something you do once, you do it over and over. One phrase I really like is John Kabat-Zinn's phrase, which is, when you notice that you're out in the future in what if land, those are my words, and he says, gently and non-judgmentally escort your mind back to the present. And you can best do that not with thinking, but with your senses, or with, as you said, with action, with motion, not with action or motion to make your anxiety go away, not with the intention of getting rid of your anxiety, but by bringing into your awareness what's actually going on right now in your present moment, not with an effort to struggle against or get rid of or banish your anxiety, which just gets you all caught up with it, but more you allow it to be there, you give it a nod, and then you come back to where you are right now, where nothing bad is happening.
Which is why willpower doesn't work, because that's basically you getting all of your brain energy to try to talk yourself out of this anxiety. And the only thing that's actually going to do that is by being more in your body or being in the present or taking action, which are all ways to kind of connect to that present moment.
But it also needs to be, the attitude needs to be a willingness or a passivity. It's not in order to get rid of the anxiety.
Rated E to T. You're listening to an ad for PC Game Pass. Want new games on day one like Indiana Jones and the Great Circle? How about living out your Sims life with EA Play? We're talking high quality PC games all for one low monthly price. We got you. Learn more at xbox.com/PC Game Pass or click the banner. Indiana Jones and the Great Circle available December 9th, 2024. Game catalog varies by region and over time. Okay, that's the ad. You can go back to doing whatever you were doing now.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/campaign to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
But it also needs to be, the attitude needs to be a willingness or a passivity. It's not in order to get rid of the anxiety. It's while you're anxious. Let me just give you a brief example I use all the time. Yeah. Let's say you're driving and you have a scary thought, like a typical scary thought, like, what if I suddenly yank the wheel into that truck? It just you start to have that thought. Now, most people would forget quickly that they had that thought. But if you're worried about yourself, or you're an anxious person, or you don't trust yourself in some way, and you get, oh my God, why did I think that thought? Then you marshal all your energy to either not think that thought or get rid of that thought or stop imagining car accidents or your funeral or wherever you go in your mind. Now, there's two ways to handle that involve an action, but they're completely different. Let's say you decide I'm going to turn on the radio and listen to music. You can be doing it this way. I hate what's going on in my mind. I've got to stop thinking it. Maybe if I turn on the radio, I can listen to the music and distract myself from it and get rid of it, get rid of the anxiety. And so I'm going to listen to the music. Okay, is it working? Is it working? Am I listening to music? Wait a minute. Really, I have to concentrate on the music because I have to get rid of those terrible thoughts, because what if they make me yank the wheel, right? But you can also do it this way. Same action. You're reaching for the radio dial and you turn it on. And you're saying to yourself, okay, well, my mind is doing that crazy garbage over there. I might as well listen to music. And it's not an attempt it's changing the channel, really, but it's not trying to turn off the anxiety channel. It's just adding in some music while it's acting nuts over there. I don't have to get involved with that stuff that's nuts. I can listen to music. The nut stuff will stop whenever it's ready. Now, that's exactly the same action, turning on the radio. But those are two entirely different things because of your attitude. You see the difference?
Yes, definitely. And I'm just reminded of, for some reason, this has been happening to me lately. I blame the hormones of the pregnancy, but like last night, I had to text my husband. I went to bed before him, and all of a sudden, I like had a flashback to when I used to be. I wasn't afraid of the dark as a child, but my grandma would watch like horror movies with me when I was like under 5 years old. And I remember she watched this one about, it was like a real life documentary about exorcisms. And for a really long time in my life, I was afraid of being possessed by the devil. So I thought about this a couple weeks ago. And ever since, now I have these moments when I'm walking in the dark and I'm like, what caused that fear when I was younger? Like, what was I thinking about? And then all of a sudden that'll go back to those moments. And then I'm thinking about being afraid in the dark. And then I'm thinking about these big shadows. And then I'm feeling it. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, just stop thinking about this. And it just makes it worse. And last night I had to text my husband and I'm like, can you just come cuddle me to sleep? Because I'm not feeling so well right now. And it's totally what you're talking about, where the thought of the fear and then the fear of the fear created a fear of the fear itself. And it was just wild.
Right. And actually what you're doing right now is far more effective than being cuddled, because you're laughing. And when you have the capacity to stand back and say, look at the absurdity of all of this. I've gotten all caught up in something that isn't happening. And, I'm acting as if it's happening. And if you can laugh, just as you did right now, and say to yourself, look at the process, look what I just did, isn't this funny? Then you can soothe yourself by laughing. And, one of the analogies that we use all the time about this is that when people are caught up in their fear, it's like they're watching a horror movie. Their bodies are going to react. If you're sitting in theater and the chainsaw guy is coming in, and you're going to start having a rapid heartbeat, and you're going to start feeling really scared. And as you're all absorbed in the movie, that's what happens. But then if somebody next to you sneezes, suddenly you bounce back and you go, whoa, I'm in a theater. Right? Now, at that point, you're not scared anymore, but your body is still doing that sensitized, rapid heartbeat, breathing thing for a little while longer, because the alarm went off, and it takes a while to subside. And so when you can get a perspective that this is a movie I made up in my mind, this movie about, the shadows are representing the devil and I'm going to get possessed, and what if it happens again? And, you made yourself a movie, or what we call a fear narrative, and then you reacted to it as if it were really happening. And then basically you called your husband and you asked for a sneeze.
Well, it sounds so silly when you put it that way.
Yeah.
When you're talking about how the difference between kind of willing yourself out of your anxiety and saying like, I can't think about this, like the mistake I made last night, versus these tools that you're bringing us, what it sounds like to me is that it's shifting the focus from I am trying not to feel this anxiety to I'm trying to prove to myself that I can handle these feelings right now. And
no, there's no proving going on. It's really a surrender. It's more like it's a shift in your perspective. So you can see that you got into some weird bubble, and you can see that it's a bubble, and it's a shift in your attitude. And the attitude is basically, this is my mind doing this thing. I'm not being told something true. It's not true or false. These are thoughts. Thoughts are thoughts. Imagination is imagination. I'm creative. I can do a really great job of scaring myself with my own thoughts. But my attitude is I don't have to buy into what I just thought. I don't have to believe what I'm thinking. I don't have to join in. Let me give you a metaphor. So you're walking down the street, you can see that you're going to cross paths with this guy who's coming towards you. And he's kind of sketchy looking. He's like wearing an old raincoat, and he's sort of limping, and it looks like he's muttering to himself. He doesn't look very savory. And you can feel it, you're getting anxious, but you're really just going to cross paths with him. And right while he crosses paths with you, he turns to you and he says something horrible. Either it's disgusting or it's terrifying. So what should you do?
say something just as disgusting back.
That's getting involved.
Okay.
Right? That's what we call entanglement. What most people come up with when they think about it a little bit is just keep walking, right? So you feel slimed, or you feel ick, or you might even feel scared, but you just keep walking. What happens if your mind feeds you something scary and you just decide to keep walking? Don't get involved, because if you get involved, what's going to happen? You're going to have a big fight, right? He's going to say something back, and then you're going to say something back. And then maybe somebody's going to get slapped, or who knows what. Somebody's going to end up, in the slammer. So just keep walking doesn't mean pretend that he didn't say that. It doesn't mean, oh my God, what am I going to do about this? It's just keep walking. And this is what we call the attitude of disentangling yourself from the what ifs. You just take a look. Yep, that happened. And then you keep going. And you do whatever's next. If you were on your way to go make a sandwich, go make a sandwich. But you don't have to suddenly do something about it. And that's the mistake everybody makes, is they feel like they have to do something about it because it feels urgent. Like, you get reactions in your body, or you just get scared in your mind. And it feels like you're supposed to do something about it. But actually, if you don't do anything about it and you don't get involved, you don't get entangled, then there's no struggle. Mm. And then it takes a little while, then it calms down on its own.
What I love about that metaphor is it's so easy to convince yourself that, why am I going to let this random stranger on the street affect my whole day? So of course I'm going to keep walking. That's his poison. I'm not going to take it.
Exactly.
But it's harder to ignore when it's coming from our own minds. And so when we can have a metaphor like that, because we're like, well, if I'm thinking this, it must be important. It must be coming from me. Maybe this is warning me of something really big. And so all of a sudden, even just those thoughts, we're becoming entangled with the fear.
Right, right. And one of the things is if you have thoughts that repeat and they intrude and they're stuck, then you start thinking, what does this mean about me? Is this a warning? Why am I stuck on this? What's wrong with me? And you add all this level of reaction to it when it didn't deserve that. I mean, it's not random what gets stuck. We don't have obsessions about, dining room chairs. We have obsessions about, perversion and violence and blasphemy and, murder and, bad stuff. Disgusting stuff. We have obsessions about, sexual things that are nothing like what you would want, right? But things get stuck. They're not important, but they're not random. What gets stuck is the thing that you start fighting with. because the fuel that makes it stickier and stickier and stickier is your struggle against it. The thing that makes it get stuck is your own unwillingness to have it there, right? So it's not random. It's people who get stuck on violent thoughts. They are people for whom violent thoughts are the worst possible thing you could think. They're gentle people. And they go, oh, what is that thought? That's a horrible thought. I can't stand that thought. I'm a gentle person. I can't do that. It's the opposite of a wish. Right? But there's some people who have violent thoughts. They don't get stuck on the thoughts. Either that is because they enjoy those thoughts, because they're not gentle people, or it goes by in a flash and they couldn't care less about it because it's just some stupid stuff that popped up, you know? And it's the way that you interact with that thought that either makes it stick or not. And why you would interact with it is that you're deeply and profoundly upset by it, right? It's the opposite of you. It's not a wish. It's not an impulse. It's not an urge. It's the opposite of you. And that's why you get so upset about it. So the people who are stuck with, what if I jump off a balcony, are people who want to live. They're not suicidal. They're like, that's the worst thing. What is that thought doing in my head? I love life. Why would I think such a thing? Oh, no. Am I unconsciously suicidal? No. That's just a thought that's so offensive to you. There isn't anybody who doesn't stand on a balcony and have that thought. But it got stuck for you because you were so frightened of it.
That makes a lot of sense. And earlier when we talked about how the amygdala works, basically it's just fired off before we can even think about it.
Exactly.
I know you said that we're not proving anything to ourselves, but it seems like unconsciously or subconsciously, we're kind of, by doing this process over and over again, we are in a way proving to ourselves like, okay, you got through that in a different way. You got through that in a different way. And then eventually, hopefully our amygdala would stop firing in the same way for that same trigger. Is that right? Then eventually, hopefully our amygdala would stop firing in the same way for that same trigger. Is that right?
The amygdala will always fire if there's a trigger. But what keeps it going is that fear of the reaction. So if there's a trigger, you will get what we call a whoosh. But the whoosh can be a moment, right? But if you go, oh no, what is it? And then you react to it, that's the second fear, and that's what gets you engaged with it. You know?
So that's a really good distinction to make, because I think some people are hoping to get to this point where, they just walk right in front of their fear of spiders and they feel absolutely nothing. Maybe they want to pick them up and pet them a little bit, but
that can be. But if a spider surprises you, even though you're very good at picking up spiders now, but if you suddenly turn around and there's a spider there, because you're surprised, right? You're going to get a little whoosh because you're surprised. That's what adrenaline is for. And so and that's not a setback. That's just what happens. But if you then start to worry about it again, then you're off and running.
So you talked about how we're really surrendering to some of these feelings so that they don't become more tumultuous or kind of expand upon themselves. And in your book, you talk about different steps for a therapeutic surrender. What are those ways that we can basically do this more gracefully?
We use the acronym DANCE. The D is discern or distinguish what's going on. In other words, notice what's happening and notice the process. You can notice this is in my imagination, or I'm in a bubble, or this is a memory, or some way where you get it labeled so that you can see what's going on. The A for dance is accept, which means don't struggle with it. It means allow whatever is in there to be in there. Whatever's in your mind, whatever's in your body, don't struggle with it. Just don't actively allow it to be there. These are thoughts and feelings and sensations. They're not dangers, they're experiences. Then the N is for no struggling, no avoiding, no getting involved, no reassuring, no overthinking, no analyzing, no working on, don't talk to the guy. And then the commit to proceed is the C, DANC, commit means go ahead. You don't have to now change your plans. You don't have to definitely do it now, and you don't have to change anything about what, as I said, if you were on your way to make lunch, make lunch. If you were on your way to getting on the bus, get on the bus. And the E is embrace the present moment as it is. So again, these are not tools. They are ways to remember that shift in attitude and perspective. It's not like a technique. It's a shift in attitude. And that's the difference, because a technique looks like I'm going to do this thing and I'm going to make it go away. And that's not what this is. This is a shift in your relationship with your anxiety. So anxiety can be your bully and make you miserable, or it can just be there. Now, if you don't give it any attention and you don't avoid things and you don't worry about it and you don't make what I call a big Megillah out of a little thing, what eventually happens is your level of general sensitization goes down, and your mind hands you a lot less to be anxious about. There are fewer triggers, there are fewer thoughts, there are fewer sensations. The whole thing settles down, and you're not handed a lot to deal with because your sensitization is going down. But if you engage and you struggle and you fight, that keeps your sensitization up, and it keeps you getting more triggers. So when you said, I'm attributing this to my hormones, you're right. The hormones increased your sensitization. That made it more likely for symptoms to come, thoughts, sensations, feelings of anxiety to come. Your job is to not make too much out of it. And then it's not that will never go away. It will. When your sensitization goes down, it tends to kind of back up, but it's a passive way of having the symptoms subside on their own. They don't subside because you fight them. They subside because they're not mattering. And recovery is really when your worries just don't matter. They come, they go, they happen, but they're not mattering in your life. And they're not making you feel bad about yourself, and they're not making you do anything or think anything or perform anything or find your technique, or now I have to go drink tea. There's none of that. It just doesn't matter.
Well, I love how actionable this episode is. I feel like it just lays out really exactly, maybe not exactly what to do, but exactly how to shift in order to alleviate some of these things that, like we said, can be really debilitating or life-affecting. So for listeners that are interested in learning more about you and about this specific information in your book, where's the best place for them to connect?
Well, if they're readers, they can go to Amazon and put in my name, and the books will all come up. Or you could put in the name of my co-author, Dr. Marty Seif, Martin Seif, Seif, and the books will come up. You can get them in audiobook too, if you're better at listening than you are, or you can get it on your Kindle. If you're not a reader and you don't want to invest that much time or energy, you might want to go to our blog, which is at psychologytoday.com. And there's a blog called Living with a Sticky Mind. There also, if you're not a learner that way, or you want to just hear more of me, you can go to my website, and then there are links to other podcasts and webinars. The Anxiety and Depression Association has webinars that Dr. Seif and I have done there's actually one that's just gone up. It's about 15 minutes on each of the 3 books. So it's very palatable. It's very easy. And you can actually see us. We're talking on I guess it's called a webinar. So they're all different ways. We're all over the place if you want to find more information.
All of the links for this episode will be at mindlove.com/248. Your challenge for this week is to bring some awareness around your indecision. Maybe it's around a goal that you've had for a while, your next step in a goal that you've been working on, or maybe it's just your Starbucks order. But ask yourself deeper questions about it. Rather than just saying, oh, I'm just indecisive, that's who I am. Or I'll never be successful, I can never finish this goal. Whatever's coming up for you, ask more questions. If you're in a line at Starbucks, maybe do it after you order, or maybe sit down and do some self-reflecting and then get back up and go in line. But the only way to really disrupt a pattern is to get curious about it. And it's so true. We let things hold ourselves back and we think that there's a really good reason for it, when a lot of times it's an irrational fear that doesn't even make sense when we say it out loud. My husband and I have been working through our own fears by just talking out loud to each other, and it is so helpful because we know each other really, really well. And I might be like, well, I'm just afraid to do this because what if this happens? And he's able to just bring up a past experience and be like, has that ever happened before? What about when this happened? Why are you only going back to your failures rather than your successes? Whatever it is, it's going to be specific to you, and you don't even need a partner to do it. Usually, you have all the answers you need inside of you. You're just not allowing yourself to see them beyond your fears. So get curious. Maybe this looks like a meditation session. Maybe it looks like journaling things out so you slow down a little bit. Maybe you talk out loud to yourself. There's a lot of ways to do this. So let me know how it goes. And if you need assistance, I'm always there on Instagram at mindlovemelissa. If you love this episode, please consider leaving a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Those 5-star reviews are so much better than even a pumpkin spice latte, and you know that's saying something. I know you do. It can be short and sweet, it can be long and detailed. I honestly love them all equally. If you'd like to support Mind Love, you can leave one of those 5-star reviews we just talked about, or you can join Mind Love Premium at mindlove.com/premium. You get episodes a day early, you get them without ads. You also get a whole backlog of over 50 episodes that you can only listen to if you are a premium member, and you even get meditations and other bonuses. So that's at mindlove.com/premium or right there in the podcast app. And finally, you can support one of my amazing sponsors, and they're all listed at mindlove.com/sponsors. And that's all for today. So thanks for giving your mind a little love today, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks for tuning into Your Higher Frequency with Mind Love. Head to mindlove.com for a free gift to keep your vibes up until next week.